Look, a couple of things I'll say are, I think, clearly understood and known by, especially this esteemed group. But there's no doubt that the world is facing a global migration crisis. I think there's just the facts and the data and the truth shows that. And for sake of time in my comments here, I'm going to really be focused on illegal immigration, meaning folks that, for a variety of reasons, have forsaken a country's rule of law, their sovereignty, or the downstream negative impacts of their country's final destination that they're going to. The legal policies and legal pathways to immigration of their destination country has become really no moment to them. And I think that's clear. And I think also what this group knows is that, but I think it's important to say this out loud. I think it's important that we continue to say this loud as part of our education and awareness platform that we go, is that border security for any country is synonymous with the country's national security. And you can't achieve either successfully unless you get a handle, unless you stop unchecked, unmitigated, illegal immigration. And I truly believe, I know this is common sense, but my experience over this past 4 decades of law enforcement experience, I've seen that common sense and logic has just, as each decade that goes by, I think has just been forsaken. I think every country has a right, and I would go a step further in my opinion, also an inherent obligation to its citizens to make sure that they know who and what is coming to their border, to ensure the safety and national security of their country. Yet this common sense principle has been overtaken by politics and ideology, where truth is distorted, facts are dismissed, compassion has been hijacked, all while political driven policy takes center stage. And of course, the media, especially in this country, but I know in the countries represented here, it's the same thing. Media has become actually an active participant in the conclusionary, preconceived agenda that's driving some of the misperception and quite ignorance in countries that's also driving that compassion to be hijacked. And of course, the death of journalism, I think, is alive and well. If I was to, put a title to my talking points, it'd be bad policy, bad politics. And of course, I'd probably add on judicial activism and the death of journalism. And let's be honest, and that's another thing too, sometimes in forums like this, we're not always honest. And I'm not going to point fingers because, a lot of fingers always be pointed to the U.S. I'll talk about that in a minute. But every nation represented here and beyond, to some degree, has been the victim of bad policy, bad politics, ideology, hijacked compassion, the death of journalism, judicial activism. Let's be honest, we all have. There are countries that, because of bad politicians, because of corruption, because there are some countries that actually reap a significant benefit from the flow of illegal immigration. Sometimes countries are doing all of that. But I'm not here to talk about other countries. Well, I wouldn't have a problem talking about some countries because I think they are absolutely doing all of those things. But the reason why I'm not, because I think I'd be a hypocrite to try to stand up here and talk about the problems of other countries and what other countries need to do, because I think America, for the past 100 years, has shown that a persistent and a consistent challenge in all of those areas. I think we've experienced 100 years of political lies, cowardice, ineptness, failures. I think America has become a country that has really fueled and poured gasoline on this raging fire of a crisis of global migration for a while, especially I would say the last probably decade and a half to maybe 2 decades. And I'll talk briefly about that in a minute. So let me talk about a couple of areas real quick. And again, I'm going to talk about policy, bad politics. Policy for the United States. And let's put this in categories. So before Trump and then after Trump, right? So let's be honest. Before Trump even became on the scene, the magnitude of bad policy in the United States, we do not have enough time. Even this great forum, we will not be able to talk about the degree of bad policy that has rendered the United States, I think, completely ineffective in dealing with the flow of illegal immigration into this country. And it's really part of the global crisis. I'll talk briefly just about a couple. One is called TVPRA, Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act. Only Congress could come up with a name like that, right? But look, it can be complicated, but because my time's limited here, I'll just give you the quick highlights. So what it was designed to do, I think 2007, 2008, it was designed to identify unaccompanied minor children that were coming to the United States and identify whether they're victims of trafficking or not. Sounds really great, right? Really compassionate. Of course, we all can get behind. We don't want kids to be trafficked. That's horrific. Absolutely. Well, what transpired was it actually created unaccompanied minors to be trafficked. It actually had a 180-degree opposite impact of what it was designed to do. But yet, year after year, decade after decade, Congress refuses to fix it. Refuses. And what transpired from that horrible policy was that it created a phenomenon that we had never seen before. Up until late 90s, even early 2000s, the overwhelming majority of illegal immigration that we saw come to the United States was single adult Mexican males looking for work. That is no longer the case. That's blown out of the window. And it's driven 100% by bad policy, bad politics. TVPR is one of those. We now have been facing, since that time, an unimaginable level of unaccompanied minors coming across our country. And what TVPRA says is, get this, just when you think it can get better, is if you're an unaccompanied minor from a contiguous country, such as Mexico or Canada, once we've identified that you have not been a victim of trafficking, we're going to return the child back to their family and home country. That makes sense to me. But if you're from a non-contiguous country, we keep them. We keep them. I remember as commissioner, as we're putting together the asylum cooperative agreements, we had representatives from all three of the Northern Triangle countries, folks that I think that were honest and legitimate about having honest conversations. I remember all three of them said to me, Mr. Commissioner, I don't understand. Why is America so insistent on keeping the future of our countries? That was many years ago, and it still resonates with me. The Florida Settlement Agreement. The Florida Settlement Agreement started with unaccompanied minors, right? Which said we can't detain unaccompanied minors. Okay, so they come, then we've got to quickly put them in this system that is completely broken, completely inept, find them a sponsor in the U.S. as quickly as possible, and send them out, and we lose track of them and we never hear from them again. That's the honest truth in this country. That's the truth. I've seen it, I've lived it, I've experienced it. And then later, that started to evolve to also apply to families, and it gets a little complicated, but that's the genesis of it. And so what we created by 2014, 2015, we have TVPRA that said if you're an unaccompanied minor from a non-contiguous country, come to our borders, no question asked where to keep you, we're not going to return you, even if you haven't been victims of trafficking. And then the Florida Settlement Agreement says if you're an unaccompanied minor, we can't detain you. Oh, and if you're a family, we can't detain you. Here's the shocking part. That's when everything changed. It was a game changer. We now went from 95, 98% single adult Mexican males looking for work to now we open it up to the entire nation because we told the entire world. We told the entire world if you're unaccompanied minor, your family, you make it to the border, illegally or not, you're going to be released in the United States, no questions asked, and you're never going to be heard from again. Shocker. Everything switched. Now, there have been moments in time, multiple moments in time, where Mexican single adult males are the minority. Before Trump, we were receiving people from 150, almost 160 different countries from around the globe. There's only 195 recognized countries in the face of the planet. For someone to suggest that that's not a problem, it's a lie. Let me talk about vetted. So think about this. You have people coming from 160 different countries. Even our allied countries, some of our strongest allied countries, the honest truth is some of their systems are so archaic, so broken down, so ineffective, we have no ability to actually vet the individual we're encountering before we release them. We have no idea to even prove the name they're giving us is their name. We have no idea to prove what their allegiance is. We have no idea to prove what their background is. Are they a murderer? Are they a rapist? Are they a pedophile? We have no ability to do that. There's an old saying in the Border Patrol, just before they fill out the form and they release these individuals, they say, hey, before you tell us your name, make sure you like it, because that's the name you're going to be stuck with as long as you're in the United States. That's where we're at. That's the truth. It's absurd. It's ridiculous. That's where the term catch and release came. Because if you came as an unaccompanied minor, you came as a family, you were being released. And I could go on and on. Eventually, fake families. We had kids that were being bought, sold, and rented. There's a story of an 8-month-old baby that was actually sold to a Honduran a male, single male, to form a fake family, to hopefully then that would be his automatic passport in the U.S. I could go on forever about stories like that. It's absurd. It's insanity. There's no nation on the face of the planet that can sustain that. But America had created this incentive for the entire world to come here and reap the benefits. That's when Trump came along. So let me talk about policies now, because we hear all the time, oh, well, there's only so much we can do. That's all BS. We can fix this. We can do this. Now, I would say to be efficient, because it's a global problem, it needs global solutions and global interaction. That's why what's going on right now is so critically important. But I think it's important we have to look at ourselves first before we go into communities like this. And so what President Trump did, in my opinion, was just a common sense approach. And he believed, right, that border security is synonymous with national security. And the flow of illegal immigration from 160 different countries that are unvetted, unchecked, and unmitigated, it does not fit with national security. It's that simple. This wasn't about being a racist or anti-brown. I've been called that 1,000 times. It's crap. It's just not true. All I want is to be able to know who and what is coming across our border to make sure I'm protecting the national interests of this country. Think about this. I jokingly refer to, so we this is not uncommon. We obtain or encounter a single adult Lebanese male from a country that we know harbors, sponsors, creates, and facilitate terrorism, right? And this Lebanese single adult male comes to us illegally, and we say, hey, what's your name? He gives us a name, and we say, hold on a second. Before we release you, we're just going to call the Lebanese government just to check to make sure you're not a terrorist, right? I mean, come on, it's absurd. That's not happening, right? But yet we release them in the United States. We encounter tens of thousands of special interest aliens, aliens that come from countries that we know sponsor, harbor, and facilitate terrorism, which we have no ability to vet them. We have no ability to be able to vet. And just because they just show up on a watch list doesn't mean they're not a terrorist. Just means we don't have any intelligence enough to put them on a watch list. But we're releasing those individuals in the country every single day. Not to mention murderers, rapists, pedophiles, etc. And I'm not gaslighting. These are facts. These are hardcore, provable facts. So, Trump administration came in and started doing stuff through internal departmental policy and executive orders, and we were able to, relatively quickly, within 24 months, reach a point where it was, I think the numbers were so high that we just said, hey, look, this has to change. Because what happened, we called the Trump effect. Just from messaging and just from tough rhetoric, when Trump first took over in 2016, his first term, the numbers skyrocketed downward. And we thought this was great. The only problem is the cartels, they're not stupid, right? I always say the cartels, the only thing that's changed in the last 30, 35 years of cartels is they've gotten stronger, more powerful, more rich. and more influential. We haven't defeated the cartels. They're stronger now than ever before. But so what we had was that, just because of the tough rhetoric, the numbers came down. But then the cartels realized, so does the rest of the planet, is that nothing had changed. Laws hadn't changed. Policies hadn't changed. We were still releasing unaccompanied minors. We were still going to release families. And so by May of 2016, we saw numbers skyrocket. And we say, hey, something's got to change. And it did. And so that's when we started to really look at the unaccompanied minors. That's when we started to look at catch and release. And so we developed programs like the Asylum Cooperative Agreements with all 3 Northern Triangle countries, which states the international standard, right? If you're truly fleeing a country because you're being persecuted and there is a legitimate right to asylum, which we all agree, that international standard should be, we should collectively get together and say, if you're an individual fleeing a country because you're personally being persecuted, I think there is a right to asylum, but we should be forcing, collectively agreeing that we should drive them to seek relief in the first safe country they come to. We should not facilitate forum shopping so they continue another 5,000-mile journey at the hands of the cartels where they're sexually assaulted, violated, many are killed even before they get here. And then even after they enter the United States, unbeknownst to them, after they're smuggled, then they're thrust into a life of sex and labor trafficking. All that's fact and real. So as an international community, we should be standing up and looking at our own country and our own policies. And I'm pointing all the fingers here in the United States to say we should drive, that we should all be working together to give relief to those that are legitimately in need in the first country they come to. That was the whole purpose of the Asylum Cooperative Agreements, which we got. Then we developed with Mexico the migrant protection policy, the Remain in Mexico. When we started telling people that were coming just because they wanted to come to America, just because they wanted a better life, not because they were victims of being persecuted. That's a false misnomer. The overwhelming majority are not being persecuted. They're just looking for a better life. They're just looking to come to the United States. And so with that, we ended catch and release. And shocker, as soon as we de-incentivized, as soon as we said no, unaccompanied minors and families, you will no longer be released in the United States, free from deportation and never touched again, shockingly, the numbers went down. We achieved the lowest number in 40 years. So policy matters. But then comes Biden. So then we had Biden effect. Because of his rhetoric, we're going to stop building the wall, we were going to open the borders, we were going to end the ACAs, we were going to end the Remain in Mexico program, 101 executive orders on day one that demolished every policy and every executive order that President Trump had instilled. And what we saw in 48 months was the worst border security crisis this country has ever experienced. Millions and millions of illegal aliens lived in this country from 160 plus different countries, unvetted, unchecked. The list goes on. It was horrible. You guys know the stats. You can look the stats. I'm not going to repeat all that, but it's unconscionable that any country would do that. Our safety and our national security will never be the same because of that 48 months. Now, some people are saying, well, okay, Mark, you're starting to sound like you're a Trump guy and you're anti-Biden. No, that's not what this is about. It's fact. That's fact. That's what happened. Look at the data. The data doesn't lie. And I'll show you in a second here how I'm going to now hit Republicans. So the failings that we had as conservatives, as Republicans, remember the first Trump administration, Republicans had the Senate, the White House, both chambers of Congress, Senate and the House, and the White House for the first 2 years. Yet they failed to pass a single meaningful piece of border security legislation. Meaning the TVPRA, nope, didn't touch it. Floor settlement agreement to reverse its negative impacts, didn't touch it. To codify the ACAs, to codify the Remain in Mexico program, the list could go on and on. Zero, nothing. They came up with a bill called Goodlat 1. It wasn't perfect, but it was okay. It was okay. Nope, went nowhere. Then they tried Goodlat 2, which is a watered down version of Goodlat 1, still didn't pass. And it didn't pass because of Republicans, not the Democrats. So what happened? Look, Biden The Biden administration didn't wake up and create this problem. This problem has been happening for 100 years because of failed policy, congressional failures, and lies and cowardice. We just had set up a system in this country where a presidency such as Biden was able to take advantage of it, right? And use the ideology because they think it's a political gain for them with respect to when it comes to open borders and what they were doing. And the Republicans failed. I always say kind of tongue in cheek that the Democrats have created the problem, but the Republicans failed to fix it, right? Because of their own political issues. And so what we had when Biden take over, because Congress failed to make anything permanent, anything sustainable, because Congress failed to address the issues that we all know are there and exist and the facts are there, they don't lie. The Biden administration was come in and they were able to obliterate policy, obliterate all the executive orders, open our borders, and make our country in 48 months experience the worst border security crisis in our lifetime. And then Trump 2.0, okay? So it's great. Great, tough rhetoric. We're doing some things. The numbers at our border have dramatically decreased because they reinstated all those policies, departmental policies, executive orders, right? That's all great. Although I have to laugh when I hear some Republicans talk about the border secure. That's bullshit. It's not secure. It's not secure. The cartels have just temporarily regrouped, right? So now they took their $13 billion annual human smuggling operation and just throwing it back into drugs. So now we're seeing meth go up, we're seeing cocaine make an emergence, all because they're regrouping to continue their operations to make money. But make no mistake, the cartels haven't given up. They haven't gone away, although we never hear from them again. But they're there. And so what we have now is a bunch of departmental policies and executive orders once again. Where's Congress? Where's Congress? My biggest chief complaint right now is a sustainable solution, one that transcends and lives on beyond Trump, right? One that which is driven by fact and reality and our national security, not ideology, right? Not politics. We're not anywhere close to that. And so what we have now, again, can be undone like that. If a Democratic administration comes in, boom, it's done. He's giving me the hook. So I'll wrap up with this. And I think this is important. So strategy and policies is important. And so one thing that I see right now, the failures that are going on. Look, there's a lot of good stuff going on right now, but the failure is a strategy, and one of them is who we're going after. The worst of the worst, right? That's the message we're giving. As in America, we're going after the rapists, the murderers, the pedophiles, etc., the gang members, the terrorists. We're going after them. Well, what's the message we're sending? There's a justice study that was done a few years ago that says you need two things for deterrence. Consequences alone, no matter how strong the consequences are, like the death penalty, is irrelevant if the perpetrator doesn't think they're going to get caught. If they truly believe they're not going to get caught, well, what does a consequence mean? It's irrelevant. Two things need to happen psychologically. One, they need to understand there's a consequence, but two, most importantly, they suggest, is they got to believe they're going to get caught. So if you don't have a strategy where you're telling the entire population of those who are in your country illegally that we're coming for you and we're going to remove you. If you don't do that, what's the psychological result? Ha! I'm good, I'm untouchable. So what we have done when we only go after the worst of the worst, they call it prioritization. That's just a DC swamp word, is we're limiting a subset, I believe, because of politics. Because who can argue with removing a murderer, right? Rather than removing the single mother of two, or the individual who've been here for 8 years, paying taxes, working hard, still here illegally. That's the tough thing. The recent operation against the Hyundai plant. I was shocked that this administration denounced it. I promise you, if illegal aliens want 5 things. I promise, I'm almost done. So illegal aliens want 5 things, right? So they want to be able to enter your country illegally. They want to be free from deportation. They want to work illegally, send money home, and bring family members. We were giving them all 5. And one of the biggest ones is to work illegally. You take that away, I promise you, this isn't Mark, this is the data talking, I promise the flow of illegal immigration will dramatically be reduced overnight. But yet we have an administration who's been one of the strongest border security, anti-illegal immigration presidencies in modern history that is actually denouncing one of the most important things we should be doing as a country, and that's work site enforcement to stop people from being allowed to work here illegally. We have to do it all from a policy perspective. And I'll wrap up with this, is that at the end of the day, I get asked all the time, okay, Mark, what are the solutions? Look, we know from a tactical policy law perspective on what needs to be done. We know that. We've got so many experts, looking at Art back, we've got so many experts, and Dale and the whole, I could go on and on, that know from a policy perspective what needs to be done. We have that. The issue is what we have not done and what we failed to do is address the ideology. We have, and I'm sure your country sells the same, we are divided in this country. If the one thing the Biden administration showed us in 2025 now, obviously the 4 years prior, we are more divided, more confused, more ignorant, and more on the wrong side of the negative downstream impacts of illegal immigration than we ever have been in modern history. And it's being driven by an ideology. So until we can educate, until we can do all the things to change that ideology, politics will never get in line. I think we have to address the ideology in our country, and then the politics will follow. And again, I'll leave you that this is a global problem. We all need to work together, and border security is national security, and you can't have that as long as you have illegal immigration.